Brothers and sisters, we back at it one more time. I'm always gonna do my best to do my best, but at the same time, I'm not gonna allow for something to bring me down or to get me outside of my character as a person. As y'all seen, expound the mental health epidemic. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now, but we're gonna focus kind of just in the U.S. in general, and we're gonna go from topic to topic. And these are things again that are happening anywhere on the earth, but we're gonna keep it local. But we can think global all we want. Now that being said, the very first thing I wanted to speak about, no screen sharing, no extra shit, just talking to y'all as my people. The first thing I wanted to chop it up about are these rash number of what I would call um lack of impulse control. Uh, I don't want to make violence trivial, but there is a capricious nature to the individuals that normally commit these acts of violence indiscriminately. We're not talking about people who target somebody for violence, which is still, I'm not here to morally judge anybody. But if we're just talking about how it looks, it doesn't look right. So it's still not right. But somebody shooting and killing one person or two or three, as opposed to shooting 15 people and killing two or three, one of them people don't agree with, but it is far more acceptable as far as if they're going to be violent. Well, let's just hope they only get the people that they're trying to get and they don't get anybody else on accident. But the mental health epidemic, I blame on the Trump administration and the Biden administration, because the Trump administration during the first presidency, that's when I got my ERPA, right? And I remember um, hitting up. I mean, the only individual I didn't reach out to was the president, but I reached out to everybody as high up as I could get to the state level, governor, the attorney general, the now serving governor Bob Ferguson. I reached out to his office directly to him, and the deputy dude got back to me. His second or third in command. They got back to me directly and pretty much told me I had to litigate it out, and that the process of litigation would determine whether or not I'd be able to own firearms again. Needless to say, when they were in a position to make people, Trump and Biden, to get mental health evaluations, they didn't. What they did, see, the NRA and all these gun advocate places it has nothing to do with mental health, because the NRA would have to have their own psychologist, people who are paid not to go and speak on behalf of the NRA, but to speak on behalf of people who you would call mentally stable gun owners, right? And to speak to that mentality versus the mentality of somebody who's deranged and might just be a functioning lunatic. And I do say lunatic with the appropriation that they lose their minds closer to the full moon than not. That being said, these individuals who are highly in question. And it's not just the violence, but what we're going to start with them and then work our way around. But these individuals who are hyper violent, and I'm not talking about for absolutely no reason, but for mostly no reason, they are hyper violent. So again, because there was no major national push to make people to have to go to get a mental health evaluation. If there's nothing wrong with you, there's no problem. It would have been free, right? You would have had X amount of time X amount of time. This would have, once again, they got all this better health stuff, all these little programs now that they needed 9 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And I say that because if you're looking at the individuals who I told people would be the college graduate students, the police officers going crazier than ever, just all these little things happening. Been several different episodes of police officers finding and killing their exes, or finding and the baby mama or whoever, right, killing them. There's been a lot of crazy stuff going on, but we're just talking about these individuals who all should have been properly vetted. And I'm talking about hundreds of, so illegal immigrants, this does not apply to. People that are not U.S. citizens, this does not apply to. But for all the documented U.S. citizens, every last one of them should have had to go get a mental health evaluation. Every last one of them. And then from there, from the people who didn't get one, you would have had a list of possible suspects for all crimes at all times. These people have to, every single time there's a violent crime, we're calling them. And we need an alibi. Right. Because just like people who call themselves criminals, jaywalk and run red lights and do things like that, they're not going to go and get a mental health evaluation. They're not going to take the time. Especially if Tyrone or Darquavius has warrants for his arrest, he's not going to go and get that done, even if there's no threat of arrest. This is how these people think. Okay, a dude on the streets who has a warrant for something that's semi-serious is not trying to go anywhere where there could be a potential police presence or the possibility of the police being called or anything like that. They're not putting themselves in that kind of position. However, these are the same people who are going out and committing these crimes. Right. So any little thing that would have thrown off the interviewer, right, from the interviewee, right, because that's what it would have been. The assessment is an interview. So you can say the assessor to the assessee, but still it doesn't matter. The point being this: when they didn't initiate a full-blown mental health campaign in the Trump administration, right on, that would have been led up into the Biden administration, there's no way that the Biden admin would have stopped. Most of these crimes that go unsolved, they would have viable suspects, even if people were on the run and ducking out and hiding out, and people were doing that which is wrong, which is helping the wicked. What has nothing to do with anything with me or with you, but to speak about it and to say it, at least I've articulated it. Now, that much being said, they didn't do that. So this is why you have all these dudes running around here who you have no suspects. None. Think about what I'm saying. If you have a pool of, let's say you have a city and the city has 200,000 people in it, right? And out of the 200,000 people, 80,000 people go and get the assessment done because another 50,000 of them are children, right? That's 130,000 people right there accounted for. So the other 70,000, right, that you're looking at, they're not all prime suspects, but anybody within these respective areas, yeah, we're blowing your line up until you come and get this assessment done. Because then people would understand, like, oh, they're creating actual suspect pools. This would work for any race, any region. It wouldn't matter. Because if you're in a part of the country where, let's say the city is 80% black, 70% black, or something like that, right? Okay. And there's a certain section of these dudes who are all known criminals. And guess what? None of the known criminals come to get the mental health assessment done. It makes it that much easier to whittle down to who you actually need to look for. It's not just, it could be anybody. Actually, it can't be anybody. Right? Because all the other people, let's just use our imaginations. For example, you go and get the mental health assessment done, right? They say there's nothing wrong with you. Or they say that you've got regular levels of anger, regular levels of anxiety, blah blah blah, right? Nothing that jumps out to them that you're going to do anything to harm yourself. You seem as if you want to die on your bed as an old person surrounded by your loved ones. Bam. 2-3 years later from that assessment, you have to get into you have to defend yourself in an altercation, and you end up taking somebody's life. They go back to the assessment. They say, well, we did the assessment. We didn't pick up any signs of anything like that. What they're saying is in correspondence to what they said about themselves, right? This fits what they said. They said that they go out of their way to avoid all kind of confrontation, to de-escalate. The police report, the witnesses, the cameras are all showing that this person did everything they could to de-escalate, that you did all you could do to get up out of there, and you had to defend yourself. That is totally different from them. There being things that peaked that they're like, oh, okay, there's a tendency to be to overcompensate with violence when they can't get their point across or don't feel like they're being heard or listened to. Whatever the assessor or the person who's doing the assessment picks up, any little thing, and they boom, boom, boom. And then again, something comes up, and right, this matches what we picked up on. It's the same thing, but they don't even have a pool of people to choose from. They didn't even give themselves that option. So when you look at it from a logical standpoint, the mental health epidemic it doesn't start with Barack Obama. If you talk about just how people acted, right? During the pandemic, they had nothing but time to get people to go do things like that. Right. You could have had them in open air environments where, you get 15-minute assessments, right? It doesn't take that long. We're going to ask you a list of questions. There's going to be a bunch of yes or no questions. There's going to be a bunch of multiple choice questions, right? Bang. Like, it's not even that deep of an assessment. But it's enough for them to look at you and pick up any kind of little small ticks that you couldn't get over the phone, that you might not be able to see, even if you're looking at me in the camera right now. There might be something that you would miss that I do, face up, where you're like, okay, I see what he's talking about. You can't tell if I'm not shaking my leg, but you couldn't tell if I was shaking my leg, right? You just can't really tell. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? There's little things. So when we have a failure of I can't call it mental logistics, but I will call it, what do we call this one? They failed to address the crises, that was happening. What's popping, bro? What's popping? I'm in here trying to, break my holy foot off on something real quick before they try to mess the stream up. But the whole thing is that still they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So Trump had a large portion of the pandemic to get everything as far as people's mental health stuff right. But the thing is, though, is the red flag law allowed for law enforcement to disarm people without ever committing a crime. Do I think it's unconstitutional? Yes. Do I know it's unconstitutional? To the degree that all people have the right to bear arms, right? Granted that they're not a felon or something like that, right? Or a treasonous coward and a traitor, then for sure, I would have to say you have the right to bear arms. So for them to just take your firearms from you or any sort of weapons, because the thing is that's what I find weird about the red flag law is they don't disarm you from every little thing, just mainly guns. And I'm like, don't you think it would be more beneficial to tell them that they can't have any weapons of any sort at all? Right. But if you're going to do that, shouldn't you provide for them a way where they can maintain their way of life? Because you can't accost somebody. Telling somebody what to do is not helping them. So the mental health assessment would not be meant to help you so much as it gives you an alibi, and it takes you out of the pool of immediate suspects unless otherwise notified, i.e., physical evidence, or there's somebody that can place you there, like an actual material witness, who can place you there at the scene of the crime whenever whatever happens. Um, there's a lot of little things that go into it, but still, the point being that they dropped the whole ball when all this happened. So, you know, I just think it's weird. I know it's weird, right on, and I think it's weird that we don't have enough people who are speaking on this and expressing it and articulating it for what it is. Because all these people that you see, like, just, I'm okay, let's run down all the college shootings, right? Forget all the club shootings that we know is going to happen, all the block party shootings that we know are going to happen, right? Let's look at all these people who are in college. There have been several in the last month, at least 4 that I can think of, college campus related shootings, whether it was jilted lover or a drug deal gone bad or a gun deal gone bad. Like, these are things that I am constantly looking at. What was this? I follow you. Okay, here's the thing though. The whole thing is about people not having stable mental health, right? So these fools are shooting up the place, right? Going crazy, right? Um, the mental health crisis is tied in with the homeless crisis, tied into the drug crisis. You have individuals who can't get past certain stuff. They can't move past what it is that's happened in their life. So, and they're not going to. In so many words, they're not going to make it past it. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't or should. I'm not telling anybody how to live their life. I'm just saying that, again, it gives you grounds to say, hey, look, I know where I'm at with the psychology in my own mind. And who's to say, let's say a person goes and gets an assessment done and they say, hey, we think that you should follow up with follow-up evaluations X amount of times a month or X amount of times a year or X amount of times a week. You know what I mean? So that way we can, get a better assessment of you. Let's say Darquavius shows up, does the mental health assessment, right? Boom. They check him out as normal. He checks out as normal. When something happens and he's like, yo, I didn't do anything, right? And they can look at it and be like, damn, Darquavius did do this mental health assessment. He did act right. They didn't, again, They mandated people get a vaccine that had no empirical evidence put into their bodies. A mental health assessment would have been far less of a violation. Right on? Far less of a violation. But the thing it still being is that we're at a time where it's so critical to understand where people are at in their minds. It's always good. Don't ask people too much, are they all right? But you should always check in with people. Always. If you work with somebody every day, it should be in your best interest to ask them how they are. How you doing today? If they say they're not doing well, tell them, well, I hope you feel better. I keep you in my thoughts. Some people aren't religious and they feel like they don't want you praying to any God at all for them. So, but some people are spiritual / religious and they don't mind you saying, I'll pray for you. You got to be able to read the room and understand who you're dealing with. So that way you can progress your story as far as you can get it. Because once somebody decides that they're going to do something nefarious, you don't have a chance if they already have to drop. For example, I know a dude who when I was little, I grew up with him, right? He killed a man at his old job that he was working at because the dude came to work with a gun and was acting a fool. And bro slipped out, went and got his pistol and came back and blasted dude. Now the thing is, had the dude just came up in there shooting, he doesn't have a chance to do any of that. So dude really didn't want to. You follow what I'm saying? I don't think dude really wanted those kind of problems, but it got him killed. Just for having a gun, because you don't know how people are going to feel about that. Just seeing a gun could make somebody want to hurt you. You see what I'm saying? So it's just one of those things where I'm not sure if there was any way to de-escalate that, but if you don't find yourself in a position where you're having to de-escalate or fight with somebody about anything like that because you've been thoughtful enough, if not just outright kind and courteous enough to just ask them how they're doing, that could be the difference between you being in the middle of somebody's mental health meltdown and somebody, and you feel me, and being a victim, and then them totally bypassing you and just looking the other way because they know that you've been genuine this whole time. You know what I'm saying? And not disingenuous. And so that's why it's like, even if you don't like somebody, being kind to them, being courteous to them, and being amicable to them is not a bad idea. Being cordial is not a bad idea. That doesn't cost you anything to say, how are you doing today? And to give them 14 seconds or 30 seconds or a minute of conversation and to keep it pushing and to say nothing else to them until the next day. It doesn't hurt you as a person. It doesn't affect you to do that. You know what I mean? If you can't condescend to a person to bequeath them a basic greeting, you know what I'm saying? Something wrong with you. But that not even being the point. The point is people's mentals are so messed up that you don't know where they're at, that it's better to just stay on the side of staying out the way, not being something that they want to look to want to do harm to, because they feel like you're a reason for their angst. You're a reason for their mental health depravity, if you will. And you don't want anybody blaming you for any sort of thing like that ever in life. You don't want nobody thinking that you slept with their woman. You don't want nobody thinking that you stole something from them. And you don't want nobody thinking that you lying to them. You follow what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of things in this life that people will bypass, but those three right there will make somebody hurt you quick, fast, in a hurry without even bringing up children or anything like that. Those first three will get you killed on this earth. However, people don't know how to stay out the way because again, they're not understanding where they're at mentally. You got dudes who are literally on the brink of collapsing, and somebody with enough wherewithal. I'm not talking about outsourcing a bunch of dudes from India to come and do the mental health assessments. I'm talking about people who got their AA, their bachelors, their masters in psychology, sociology, what they call it, human environmental studies, right? That's what they call it, right? People environmental studies, right? People like that who never had a chance to really use the degree that way. This would have gave them an opportunity. It would have gave them a nice little chunk of change. It would have did a lot of little things, and they could have nipped in the bud potential shooters. They could have said, okay, these dudes are all suspected shooters. Anyway, this guy got off on a murder, an attempted murder. This guy's already beat multiple bodies. This dude ain't never been charged, but he's been suspected in multiple murders. And ironically, none of them showed up, right? Ironically, none of them showed up. This guy's a hardcore banger, right? He ain't show up. So when things happen, we have a pool of people we can just go round them up every time. And all you can do is hope that your ass is in jail while somebody's getting touched. So you can be like, see, I told you it wasn't me. Right. That sort of thing. And it's not profiling. Go get the assessment done. So that way we can know where you stand on some of these subjects and some of these things. But people are scared and they're afraid to do that which is right. See, the government failed. They didn't fail me. Right on, they failed the people. They didn't fail me, they failed the people. Because by them allowing for true to life psychopaths to run around here, again, I got red flagged. Not by somebody I know, not by a loved one, right? Not even by local law enforcement, by law enforcement in another city in another county, in the state that I live, but still in another city in another county. Why that's so important is because that same law enforcement didn't go and make sure that the people who would be potential violent crime offenders, right on, right, potential victimizers, none of those individuals did they identify. Right now, their homicide clearance from year to year, it changes. But there was a few years back where it was barely over 50%. Right. They're not solving all these homicides in any city. Every year they get to change the numbers. Because if they had to crunch the numbers together every year to get you a real average, you'd be like, whoa, bro. You guys only solve 13% of homicides? You guys had a 10-year run where 70 or 80% of homicides went unsolved? Granted, some of the people who were getting murdered were people who murdered other people. So I'm not saying it all works itself out, but it balances out somewhat. But the point is like people do not get that the mental health crisis, the mental health epidemic is largely a fault of the US government for not properly using the resources that they had when they were giving people money every week. A part of you getting your little unemployment freaking benefit should have been that in order to get them, you have to get this assessment done. They made people answer all kind of questions. Why not make them do an assessment? See what I'm saying? It's that sort of thinking. It's that sort of shit right there that makes you be like, I know these niggas don't get it. you know, these these individuals in this state that I'm in particular, there's a lot of people that are confused, right? And when I say confused, I mean that literally. Born a woman, think they're a man. Born a man, think they're a woman. And it's shameful because you wouldn't think that somebody would try to force their mental illness onto you. Like, for example, if somebody thinks that the moon is made out of cheese, just because they think that doesn't mean I have to think that or believe that. Just because that's their belief, right? Even they say that's what they know. I don't have to know that. So I don't see how we're allowing individuals who, by all metrics, we would consider mentally ill to be in any sort of positions of power or influence. But again, though, all the different individuals who this shit applies to, the white boy who killed the four people from the same family, pretty much, and then spared the little baby, right? Or like the other little white dude who killed the four people in the bar. I'm not saying that what they did was right because it's fucked up. What I'm saying is that we got to look at the mental health of all the individuals involved. Because the person that snaps might not be the initiator of the issue. Their response might be to what we call stimuli, nerve stimuli in the environment. Okay? So it's like if you were to go to work and the building were to catch on fire and the only way you could get out was to break a window and jump out of it. You follow what I'm saying? Like, if the building wasn't on fire, do you break a window and jump out? And I'm not saying that people are starting fires per se, but they could be dousing a live wire with an accelerant. You know what I'm saying? Like they could be doing things that make it to where it's more likely for something to happen and not less likely. That's the point. So when you're dealing with people who can't even, again, basic articulation, how this video not get interrupted with, not get messed with, but the other last few did, no idea. Maybe because the topic is so benign and so neutral that there's nothing that they can say. And it's an honest topic that I've already covered many moons ago when I first got my ERPO 7 years ago. I was talking about the mental health stuff. I try to tell people about it, and it has percolated in these last 4 or 5 years of mass shootings, right? Where it's just been a phenomenal number of mass shootings every year. And the reasons for these shootings become ever more questionable. Not to say that any shooting is not questionable, but to say that